My students have asked me to do some cooking videos, and so I'm going to do that. And this first recipe is going to be no-bake cookies, and I will include a link for the recipe and instructions at the bottom of this video. You can also check out my blog at www.lifeintheresourceroom.com. All right, I went ahead and started on this and then remembered, oh yes, I need to make a video. So in the pan, this is actually kind of a small saucepan. I usually use a bigger one. There is 1 stick of butter or margarine, and so far I put 2 cups of sugar in here. The next ingredient I'm going to do is milk. 1/2 cup of milk. I'm going to pour that on there. That milk is going to help that sugar, when it dissolves and cooks, it's going to become more creamy. Otherwise it just becomes very crystallized. Okay, my other ingredient that I'm going to use is baking cocoa, and this was the ingredient I was missing the other day when I tried to make these, and I substituted some chocolate milk mix, and it just really didn't taste the same. So I had my husband get me some baking cocoa at the store. So this is just Hershey's cocoa, same stuff I've been using my whole life. Okay, so I am going to need 4 tablespoons of the baking cocoa, and so you can just kind of gently shake it off, or you can use the lid to smooth it off to make sure you're getting 4 tablespoons. I don't think it hurts to get a little too much, but it might not taste the same if you get way too much. Okay, 3 and 4. So you can see that took a pretty big chunk out of my baking cocoa. I guess it's a good thing my husband bought me 2 canisters when he went to the store. Okay, so this is all we need for right now, and I'm going to turn the heat on to medium. We actually do not keep our knobs on the stove because 1, if our grandson is here, we don't want him to be able to reach them, and 2, we discovered that because these are on the top, they tend to get pressed down when you set things on the stove, and they'll turn on, and so we started doing this to be safe. We haven't had any more accidental fires since we started doing that. Not that we actually had fires, but you get my meaning. All right, so typically I would use a very heat resistant spoon for this, and I have a wooden spoon. This time I'm going to use this one with the heat resistant rubber type material, probably silicone. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to gradually stir this, and just kind of, you want to make sure it gets wet all the way through. And as the sugar heats up, it melts, and so it will become more and more liquid. So we're taking a solid and turning it into a liquid by applying heat. Get a little bit of chemistry in here, and you didn't even know it. Okay, usually you want to do medium heat. I have it kind of medium high, so it's at about a 6. You don't want to get it too hot or you will scorch your sugar. Another thing that you can do is to spray some non-stick cooking spray into your pan before you start, but this, because of the margarine, I usually don't have too much trouble with it sticking. And a lot of you probably have non-stick pans. My husband and I finally gave up on those just because our kids kept scratching the non-stick surface, and it was driving me crazy, and it would ruin the pan. So we finally just went back to good old-fashioned aluminum or stainless steel, and you do have to put a little more elbow grease into cleaning them, but you really can't hurt them. Sometimes you just pour in the Ajax, let it sit, and then scrub. All right, as you can see, all of my sugar is moistened now and it's starting to melt. You want to stir constantly. You don't want to just let it sit on the heat because it will scorch. And I usually kind of like scrape the butter just to help it speed it up a little. It probably doesn't really matter. But I am stirring this constantly but gently. You don't want to stir it hard or fast because you will splash it out. And as it gets hot, it can really burn you. So again, be careful. You want to make sure that your parents are helping you with this. Do not ever cook without your parents' permission. Okay, so we are just going to continue to let that cook. I'm going to let it sit for a second because I'm going to run and grab something really quick. And hopefully it will continue to melt but not scorch. Okay, so what I had to run and get was my parchment paper, and I love these pop-up sheets that can fit on the cookie sheets. I use them all the time. I also use them when I am painting because they're really good for setting something I've just painted on so that it doesn't, and I can smell that starting to scorch a little bit. I need to stir. Anyway, especially when I'm working with spray paint, and I can, once it's dry, I can set it on there so that the paint doesn't get damaged. When I've had to mail things, I'll usually wrap it in parchment paper so that it doesn't get humid and the paint come off. Just a little extra information in there for you. All right. Now, I can tell, maybe you can tell too, this is, as it heats, that sugar is becoming more and more liquid and it's going to get thinner. And that's the whole idea. We want all of these ingredients to dissolve together. This is what we call a solution in chemistry. So we took the separate ingredients, put them together, and we want them to essentially bond together. So this is a solution. It has more than one thing in it mixed together, which makes a whole new thing. And in this case, this is chocolate. Okay. Oh, look, see how thin that's getting? It's really just pouring off of that spoon now. So I'm grabbing a few more ingredients. One of them is vanilla. You can use real vanilla or imitation extract. This is just Dollar General special here, right? We are going to need quick cook oats. So oatmeal, the kind that cooks in a minute. The other kind will not work very well because it won't get as soft as it needs to get. The last ingredient that I'm going to get that is optional, you do not have to use this ingredient, and we are going to do peanut butter. And I am not allergic to peanuts, and I love peanut butters. But I have, growing up, I had friends who were extremely allergic to peanuts, so whenever we made stuff for our church, we never put peanut butter or peanuts in it because we wanted our friends to be able to enjoy it. So I know some of you are allergic to peanuts, so obviously you would not put the peanut butter in there. It is completely optional. These will taste great even without it. And I've made it both ways. I can also tell you from experience, if you're out of white granulated sugar, that brown sugar works just fine for this recipe. In fact, my favorite way to make it is with 1 cup of white sugar and 1 cup of brown sugar. I didn't use the brown sugar this time just because I have a limited supply and we're trying not to go to the store. Okay, so the next thing I need It's all melted, and you can see it's starting to bubble. It's starting to boil, and that's what we want. When it comes to a full boil, so when the whole surface is boiling, then I'm gonna start my timer, and I'm gonna time it for 2.5 minutes. Okay, it is a full boil now. Okay, so we want it to boil at a full boil for 2.5 minutes. I might go just a little bit over because it took me a minute to remember how to set the timer on my microwave. Ooh, and I can smell it getting hot. I'm going to turn down the heat just a little bit. I don't want it to scorch. And it's splashing. Okay, because this pan is a little bit too small, I can tell that I'm going to have to mix my cookies in a different dish. Ordinarily, I use a bigger pan and I can just put the oatmeal in here, but that's not going to work this time. And it is getting a little messy because it's a little too shallow. Okay, and shallow means that the pan is not deep enough. It's like going into the shallow end of the water at the pool. It's just not very deep. So I'm just continuing to gently stir this to keep it from scorching because it is extremely hot now. You also want to be very, very careful. You need your parents' help with this because it is extremely hot and it can really hurt you. That's why we say you must have your parents' permission and help to make recipes. Okay, and I'm just waiting for the timer to go off. It is bubbling. It's a good thing I have a long spoon or I'd be getting burnt. Those bubbles pop and they kind of spit at you a little bit. Okay, as soon as the timer goes off, I'm going to turn off the heat and I'm going to remove the pan from the burner. When I was a girl, we always had gas stoves, and so you could just turn off the heat. You didn't have to remove it, but on electric stoves, it stays hot for a long time, so you have to really just remove the whole thing. Okay, there is just a few seconds left, and I know I had a few extra seconds, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off my heat. And I can feel it kind of wanting to stick to the bottom. There we go. Timer just went off. So I'm going to remove that from the burner. I want to be extra careful not to touch that hot burner. I have done that before and it is not a pleasant experience. Okay. Now, at this point, I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And again, you can use the imitation vanilla extract. So I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons. And man, that burner's hot. I'm trying to be really careful. You do not want to see me demonstrate getting burnt. Okay, I'm going to stir that in. Sometimes if it's still really hot, it'll bubble up. So when you put the vanilla in, stand back a little bit. Oh my gosh, that smells so good. You guys are going to be so hungry from looking at this video. All right, you're supposed to put in half a cup of peanut butter. And I do not like having to clean a peanut butter cup when I use a measuring cup, so I just use a big tablespoon. And I will just put 2 big scoops of this spoon of the peanut butter in there. It's so much easier to wash the spoon. And I don't think you can put too much peanut butter or not enough. It's going to be good no matter what. That is the only ingredient I recommend not measuring carefully. And your parents might appreciate this. This is my trick for cleaning the spoon. so that it doesn't make a big mess in the sink, I wipe it all off with a paper towel or napkin, and then I put it in the sink to be washed. Nobody likes to touch it when it's been sitting in the soapy water, when it's got all that peanut butter on it. Okay, so now I'm just gonna stir it to dissolve the peanut butter. If I was not putting peanut butter in it, I would already be adding the oats. But since I put peanut butter in it, I wanna make sure it's nice and mixed in. Now, I think this is still technically a solution, but the peanut butter doesn't really dissolve into the solution as well. So maybe it's more of a mixture. And in fact, that is true. At this point, it's a mixture because the peanut butter, it spreads out, but it doesn't become part of the solution. So if I were to just let it sit, the peanut butter would probably separate, and I'm guessing it would move to the top. I'm not really going to experiment to find that out because that would be a waste of some really good ingredients, in my opinion. All right, so then the last part is the oats. We're going to add 2.5 cups of oatmeal. So here I have the oats, and this has like a pour spout. So I'm just going to pour it carefully. I don't want to get way too much. Okay, there's 1, 2, and about a half. Again, you probably should measure that carefully. I'm being lazy. Oh, and I forgot I was going to do this in a bowl so it wouldn't spill. Oh well. Okay, so now I'm just mixing it to get it all mixed in. And I'm going to put my parchment paper down. When I was a kid, I always used foil. I would just put tin foil down on the kitchen cabinet and just put it directly on there. That works. Okay, now it's getting nice and stirred in. Scrape the edges. Oh, that smells so good. The hardest part is waiting for it to actually dry. If you get it, this is a pretty good mixture here. It's a little moist, so I could add just a little more oatmeal just so that it'll dry out quicker. You know, oatmeal's good for you. Just a little bit. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put spoonfuls on the paper. These are going to be a little bit big. Sometimes if I'm making them for an event, I'll use a cookie drop tool to make sure that they have a uniform size. But these are just going to be pigged out on by me and my family. And I will do all the cleaning in just a little bit. Okay, do another pan. All right, so we have made our no-bake cookies, and there is just a little bit of stuff left in here, and I love to get a spoon and eat that before I wash the pan. And I hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope you can try it. If you do, let me know and tell me how it turned out.